Geist is a first-person adventure game, focusing heavily on the adventure side. There's a fair amount of action and shooting in it, but I think a lot of people out there think, oh, it's a first-person shooter, and they try to compare it to everything else that's on the market. And what we really tried to do was make a first-person game that had some unique things that people haven't necessarily done before. And the main thing for that is the whole idea of possession and also being a ghost in general. Nintendo and us butting heads, no. I mean, Nintendo is just, they're very logical, they're very easygoing, and we always got along. I mean, there'd be times where an idea that we had, it was a little tricky to get across just from a cultural or a language barrier, and the same thing in the reverse. But for the most part, I don't think we ever had any, like, clashes.
Okay.
On the environment in Geist, it all takes place in the Volks Corporation, which, as the story progresses, you find that this building, which is mostly subterranean, was built in the early 1900s by this woman who thought that her dead husband was communicating to her and telling her that she needs to build deeper and expand out farther underground. And essentially you find that it was really something else communicating to her that was trying to get discovered. And it was using the death of her husband to manipulate her. We try to put in there a strong story and give it more of a narrative than a standard FPS might have. So as you go throughout the game, you'll learn through different ways exactly what this place is and where all these people came from. Since you spend a good part of the game without a body, there's a lot of interaction just trying to find a host. So there'll be interaction between the ghost and people, and then once you get a host, there'll be interaction between you and the other people who don't necessarily know that you're possessed. And then later on in the game, people will pretty quickly find out that, oh wait, this is possessed, or this person's possessed, and I need to do something about that. Object possession in the game came about partway through development. At one time, the ghost would sort of manipulate things from afar, but Japan would, during one of their many visits, they would come like every couple of months, and Japan at one time said, look, we need to talk about the idea of object possession, which is something that Miyamoto-san, whenever he would review the project, he would talk about, well, I wonder what it would be like to possess a container or to possess a plant. And they didn't quite know what he meant by that or what to do with it. And when we first started talking about it, we weren't quite sure either, or how it would fit in the game. And we met for probably a good week trying to figure out how object possession could fit in the game. And at that point, we discovered that, well, instead of controlling an object from a distance, what if you just possess the object and then roll around as a soda can or cause a container to explode, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say my favorite would be, there's a level in the game where it's in a helipad, and there's a number of missile towers that are protecting the pad, and there's a friendly helicopter that you have to make sure it lands safely. And there are explosive containers and gun turrets stationed all throughout this helipad, and you have to use a demolitions host that you possess to ride up these big elevators and blow up these missile turrets. But you can try it just as a standard action game and just use this, this demolition guy to blow people up with these proximity mines. Or you can go around as a ghost and go into each little pocket and use the containers and use the missile, what do you call them, the gun cameras to mow down the enemies. And there's ways you can do it where you can pretty much clear everybody out without getting any damage to your host. And for me, that's always a challenge. I just love going back and playing that level over and over and doing it different ways. The hardest aspect was probably the whole idea of possession and dispossession, and just, I mean, you're not just playing one host or one character from beginning to end. You're playing all these other people, animals, objects, and it was a big challenge to try to get everything to work together. And just the idea of dispossessing from a bug standpoint was really interesting, because we would get all these weird bugs of people would put their back up against a door and then dispossess, and then their host would be on this side of the door and then they would be on the other side of the door. And it was a big challenge to try to get everything to work smoothly.
Okay.
The control schemes, try to keep them intuitive, it uses pretty much what you would expect in a first-person game as far as controls go. We try to make everybody happy. When you possess other characters, they still operate the same way. When you possess objects, a lot of times it'll go down to a single stick scheme of just steering that object around. And then we knew that Nintendo had a philosophy of using the A button as the primary action for any character or any object. So we stuck to their tenets on that and just tried to follow Nintendo guidelines. As far as the Geist sequel goes, I really can't comment on that officially.